Hey y'all, welcome to the Stay at Home Son podcast. And today we have a very special episode. We have Jr Stokes, writer and director of the Beautiful Pam film. Now, this film was an amazing film with a lot of hard but very good and well-developed topics. So, Jr, I want to thank you for coming on, and we're going to get into this film today.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so The Beautiful Pam, it has a lot of very hard-hitting, tense topics. And I saw that you're not only the director, but you're the writer of this film as well. So, how did it start? How did you get the inspiration for this?
Well, I love films that make me feel certain ways. I mean, I love music that makes me feel certain ways too. I love art that I can resonate with, and that was a big thing in making this film. I wanted to make a film that could really resonate with people, you know. I don't like to write about things that I don't feel strongly about. I only really feel connected to films and material that I make that I can really feel out, if that makes sense. So in making this film, like Beautiful Pam, I wanted to write about isolation and loneliness and figuring out how to be a person, man, because being a person is not easy. And we see that throughout the film. There's a lot of uncomfortable moments that Pam has to face. So yeah, I think that's really the biggest reason why I wrote the film. Trying to figure out how to be a person is something that I think we all go through at different stages of our life.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that film felt lived in and it felt very relatable and very realistic because honestly, when it comes to like action scenes, there's not a whole lot, but the film still keeps you on your toes and it keeps you wanting to keep watching it. And it's because that character dynamic and the way they get along is so realistic. So did you kind of put that emphasis on your actors trying to like say, "Hey, we're really going for a realistic approach on this. We really want this to feel real and lived in"?
Mhm. Well, I think that's a great question because there was a lot of naturalness to what we wanted to convey within the film, right? I specifically, from my perspective as the director, I wanted to pitch to the actors to take ownership of this story and these characters, right? And their relationships with one another. And in doing that, right, these actors, they came in and they did a hell of a job, from our lead, Tom, to our co-lead, Peter and Beck and this person and this person. They all did it such a fantastic job of taking ownership of their characters and blending some of their own personalities and traits into the characters. And I think maybe that's why it feels sort of natural in a way. I think really a lot of that has to do with how talented these actors were, how great of a cast we had.
Yeah, I would definitely say the lead actor for Pam was very talented. So off of that, I'm going to ask you how did the how the lead actor kind of feel when he was told he's like, okay, I'm making this film and you're basically going to be a gay prostitute who tries to win back the approval of his family. Because like if I was given that role, I'd be like, interesting.
It's a heavy
Yeah.
role to play for sure.
I think Pam. While many people could potentially not be able to relate to Pam's lifestyle, Pam goes through a lot of things that I think we all have gone through or might end up going through, right? I think there's a lot of universal aspects about Pam as a person that many people have been able to relate to, you know? And then there are some people that have seen the film that I've talked to that said, hey, listen, I do kind of, I do relate to Pam a lot more directly, so. I think as far as Pam, being attached to the role, playing this, Tom, sorry, being attached to this role, playing this role, I think there was a lot of care and a lot of passion and even like a sense of protection over the role. I think Tom really wanted to understand Pam as a person. And as a result of that, right, throughout the film, we see Pam not being understood by people in the film, So at the very least, and Tom taking this role and people watching this film, we just want people to understand these characters and understand how Pam feels in life.
I think that's exactly how I thought. Because like when I was watching this whole film, like I could really get behind the fact that he was trying to win back his wife and his
Sure,
son. But I'm like, I initially I'm like, oh he's a prostitute. But then I'm like, oh yeah, well he has feelings just like the rest of us. He's trying to win back his wife.
sure. Yeah, I think that's For me, I think Pam, the way I interpret the film, right, is I think Pam, I never thought that Pam would be trying to win back their wife. I've always found that Pam is trying to feel seen by their ex-wife and by their son. And I think, again, that's what the movie's about at its core is trying to feel seen. And that's something I think we all go through in our own ways. So yeah, I think that's a really cool way to look at it, definitely.
There was a bunch of little scenes in this movie that really stuck out to me, like certain words, certain dialogues, certain like little things that really like made it feel believable. But one scene I really thought said a lot was when he was shopping for a gift to give to his son Peter with the girl he met, Rose. And he's trying to
Yeah.
buy a gift for an 18-year-old boy that she hasn't been in his life for a long time. And he's like, he has a toy. And Rose is like, this, do you really think this is what an 18-year-old would want? And I thought that was funny at first, but then I was like, that's kind of beautiful in a way because it really shows how like lost he's been from his son's life, you know? So was
Yeah.
that intentional or was that written in like that? Because I just thought that really touched me when I saw that little scene. It really hit home.
Well, I appreciate it. I really do appreciate that. I think Pam shopping for Paul, we kind of are able to see the disconnect that Pam has to their son, right? Just through that one scene, right? And then Rose, makes that cheeky little comment, you'd still think he'd want to play with toys. So I think that's a great way to look at the scene, is that there's obviously a disconnect, and that's what we see throughout the film multiple times, is Pam feeling disconnected from their son, and Pam trying to make amends with that idea, and that's tough. Pam has to constantly face the challenges and the ideas of fatherhood throughout the film, and that's fatherhood and parenthood, really, family, these are all monumental things in life, right? So I really like your takeaway on that. It is a scene that does say a lot more about relationships than what's on the surface.
Yeah, I felt
I
like this
think this.
movie. Oh, you can go ahead, Thomas. You can go ahead,
Yeah,
Thomas.
I was just gonna say the scene that stood out for me was when Pam is working and he's in the car with one of his clients, and basically the client says to him, he's like, I considered killing you, but now I'm not going to. And this after he just said that he just killed somebody who was underage. So just kind of go through like where the inspiration for that scene came from.
Well, that's actually one of my favorite scenes. Watching it in theaters with people. I mean, people are like gasping when the character says that line. I just killed a 14-year-old boy. People are really like, "Whoa,
Yeah,
that's a
it,
left
it, it
turn."
comes at you fast too.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of my favorite scenes to write as well. First, I'll give you an indirect inspiration that has nothing to do with the film directly. So there was a Gilgo Beach killer. I live in New York, and there was a serial killer a couple of years ago called the Gilgo Beach Killer, and he would kill prostitutes on Gilgo Beach in New York. And so I kind of thought of that, and also that's a real thing that a lot of sex workers face. There's a lot of dangerous, predatorial, crazy people that want to take their anger and frustrations out on sex workers. So that was another part of why I wrote that scene. As far as a direct influence on why I wrote the story for the scene for the film, I think Pam is constantly flirting with danger, right? We see that throughout the film in multiple different ways, right? Whether it's addiction or self-harm, or just self-destructive behaviors. And in that scene, that's one of the only scenes in the film where Pam doesn't exactly cause that. Like Pam, that's an indirect way of Pam flirting with danger. Whereas a lot of other parts in the film, Pam is directly flirting with danger, if that makes sense. And I thought that would be a nice way to contrast the rest of what Pam goes through in the film.
Yeah, no, it's a very good call to action in a way because it gets him thinking about his life and like, like wow, I had that near-death
Yeah,
experience pretty much, and it kind of like leads a setup. It was a very good setup for sure that sets
thank
up the
you.
whole film. I
Thank
really
you so
enjoyed
much.
that. One thing I have to mention about it is I felt I might be reading it wrong, but I felt like the ending was a little open-ended, which is a good thing. It definitely made me think what really did happen. So I don't want to
Yeah.
spoil it. I want to just hear your kind of thoughts about that ending because I felt like the ending was very profound.
Thank you. Thank you. It really means a lot to me that you could take that away from the ending because it is supposed to be open-ended. The best movies for me, the best movies for me are the ones that kind of leave me thinking afterwards. And I felt that it would be potentially it wouldn't be as effective to the story we just watched for an hour if I completely closed the door on what happens with Pam, right? Where Pam goes and what Pam does. I think when you watch the film, Pam kind of lays it out in every scene what Pam wants to do, right? It's really up for interpretation depending on who you are. You know, I've had people say to me, without spoiler, I've had people say to me, "Well, I think this or I think that." You know, I personally I understand what Pam does. I understand where Pam goes, and I think when you watch the film, there Pam lays it out in almost every scene what Pam's gonna do. But yeah, we definitely did want to leave it open-ended, and I'm glad that you feel that was profound. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it
I
was a
my
great.
personal
Yeah, you go ahead,
My
Thomas.
personal my personal view of it, I thought it was like a little more optimistic then, just because like throughout the entire film we follow him through these shabby motels and like this dim lit like red light district, and then at the end it's like this wide open like bright beach. So I'm like, oh, maybe there are better times ahead.
hmm I think I've heard that before. I've definitely heard that before. You know, I mean again, that's the beautiful thing about movies, right? And art is that we can all walk away with our own interpretation of what we just witnessed. So I've definitely heard that before. That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, and one thing I want to talk about too, because we're talking about the character dynamics, and the main one is Pam trying to get closer with his son Peter. But one thing I thought that was very interesting is almost in a way he becomes the antagonist, Beetle, his best friend. We slowly find out that all's that's not meets the eye with him, and he's actually been, kind of a negative in Pam's life. So
Mhm.
first of all, how'd you get the name Beetle for a character? I thought that was very interesting. I was just wondering where that came from because I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that it was memorable. And also, how'd you work about that dynamic of kind of having a, kind of a toxic friend kind of working and kind of showing like sometimes who you hang out with can be a bad influence. And it's almost like Pam didn't realize that till later on until he confronted him.
Well, I was originally going to name him Roach.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and then I said, you know what, Roach is maybe a little too like it's a little too gross. I think people might like not want to watch the movie if they have to hear the word Roach every scene. So I changed it to Beetle because I don't know, I think Beetle's just a cooler name. And the actor who plays Beetle, Peter, he also liked that name change a little more too. And then as far as conveying this toxic friendship, right? And what we see in the film takes place over a week or so, 2 weeks or so. Whereas there are moments, especially towards the end in that last scene between Pam and Beetle, where Pam says to Beetle, like, there's a rundown of everything that Pam has done for Beetle, right? And the way that Beetle, the way that he responds to that is to just be like, "Hey, go fuck yourself. I don't give a fuck what you did for me," you know? Sometimes the people we are around, sometimes the people that we enjoy are not always the best for us. You know, they're not always the best influence on us. And Beetle, especially from scene to scene, he's an interesting guy. He's definitely an interesting influence on Pam and the things that Pam is going through. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought it was very well done because I
Thank
don't
you.
know if this was the intention, but it almost kind of crept up on me. Like at first, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe Beatles, I guess you could say maybe behind in life for where, society says a 40-year-old guy should be. But he seemed like a good friend though. And he seemed like, he had Pam's
Yeah.
back. And it was like it almost like it didn't hit me until the reveal happened where he confronts him like, wow, this guy's actually the antagonist of this film. And
Yeah.
I love that though because this movie, like I said, the one thing I will say about this to anyone who talks about is not a whole lot of action sequences happen, but yet you're glued to the seat because the acting and the feel is so real and the way the pacing is so impeccably well done
Thank you. Thank you
that when
so
you
much.
watch it, it feels so like fast paced and so like fun to watch because it's just a really good story. So well
Thank
done
you
on
so
that.
much.
Well done on that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think a lot of that has to do with the dynamic between Tom and Peter, right? The actors who play those roles, because they're very close in their personal lives. I'm very close with them as well, but they're also just amazing actors. You know, they're just amazing talents. They're amazing people, and what they were able to bring to their roles independently is something that only they can, right? I really wanted to preach taking ownership of the material to the cast, to the crew. And I think Peter and Tom did such an excellent job of doing that, right? And sort of incorporating their own personalities into the roles. And like you said, there's just this natural feeling throughout, you know? I mean, I really wanted this film to feel like a documentary. You know, so when I was editing the film, I didn't use like a script to go off of. I really just wanted to, I wanted everything to flow and pace at a really in a really natural way.
And it definitely shows in the film. It has almost like an early 2000s kind of feel to it, like early like
Yeah,
90s indie film. It just
that's
I really
exactly what I was going for.
yeah,
I
you
was
said
gonna say, it reminds me of like those Instagram reels where you like see like early 2000s like Pacific Northwest. I'm like, oh.
yeah, yeah. It was all right. So yeah, you were talking about how a lot of the film might have had a little bit improv because you wanted that naturalistic style. So how much of it was improv and how much of it was scripted?
Well, I think a lot of it was scripted, you know, and as far as improv goes, you know, Tom is a, you know, great actors are often great writers, right? And Tom is a great writer in his own right in the sense that he can come to me and say, "Hey, maybe I could say this line. Maybe it'll feel more natural for me to say this." And it sounds great and it works great. And we would rehearse that and we would write that into the script, you know. So I don't think there's ever really any moments that we see in the film where improv came like on set, you know, spontaneously, right? A lot of what we had improved and rearranged and changed around came in the rehearsal room, right? We rehearsed this film for about 2 weeks before we ended up shooting. So you know, that's really what it boils down to, honestly. And then as far as you know, rearranging certain words and lines and saying this or that, again, a big thing for me was to preach ownership to the cast, right? And in doing that, right, telling people to take ownership of something, they're gonna want to have their own way of doing certain things and saying certain things. And it's about finding that middle ground with your collaborators, you know. And there were certain things I would push back on or they would push back on, you know, but in the end, I think we all found a really nice middle ground to work from. And especially in the scenes between Pam and their ex-wife, Lauren, you know, Tom and Beck, the actors, they had a lot of behind the scenes moments of talking to one another and saying, well, maybe I could say this or maybe I could say that. You know, that's the biggest thing. What I want is for things to feel natural. Because when a movie doesn't feel natural, when a character, when a performance, or when a dialogue, when it doesn't feel natural, it makes you want to turn it off, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
that was that was something that I really wanted was for them to take ownership, and I think that's how that's where the improv in the film was born from.
Yeah, and you talk about taking ownership of the characters that they each played. And one thing I thought that was pretty cool was that dynamic you were talking about of the ex-wife Lauren and Pam, and
Yeah.
how Lauren did such a great job with her lines as playing a mother and also an ex-wife who still has respect a little bit and love for Pam,
Yeah.
but she doesn't like where he's at. Because I feel like a lot of people when they would make a film like that, the actor might have doubled down on the "I want you away from my kid, I want you away from my kid,"
Exactly.
because that's the easiest emotion to play. But she
Exactly.
does a really good job of staying in that gray area of like you could tell that she still cares about Pam and you can tell she's uncomfortable by this situation. And I
Ah,
want to give you props as a director on that because I know it's
yeah.
very hard to direct that out of actors like that. So you did a phenomenal job making that realistic on that
Thank you
dynamic.
so much. I appreciate that a lot. And, you know, but a lot of that for me, a lot of that has to do with Beck and right what she was able to bring because Beck was able to bring such a level of empathy to this role that personally I feel maybe wasn't so prevalent on page, right? On the script. It's like you said, a lot of actors would want to come in and they'd want to play, you know, the mean ex-wife, you know, you fucked up, you did this, you did that. Beck came in and she had this overwhelming sense of empathy for the material, for her character, and for Tom's character. And so, like you said, she was able to play all the right notes that a lot of other actors wouldn't have wanted to play. And I personally give a lot of props to her. She did an amazing job. And another thing too, I feel when we watch the film, right, when we see Pam and we see Lauren Lauren says to Pam, right, and I agree with this point wholeheartedly. There's nothing about who Pam wants to be that is deserving of like confrontation or anger, right? Pam is who Pam is. That's just what it is. And Lauren's problem with Pam is, their addiction, right? And their destructive lifestyle outside of their identity per se. And again, I think Beck Fordyce did such a great job of that. So yeah, I appreciate your analysis on that. That was great.
Yeah, and towards the I know we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but the stylistic choices towards the end with the son giving the phone call and the letter really left that
Yeah,
gray area open too, which I like.
thank you.
And it just kind of shows like how sometimes even as people we have these things like we want to be a certain way and we hang out with who we want to hang out with, but sometimes when
Mhm.
you're trying to get it with other people, it's like you have to make a sacrifice and say I can't be me because I want to be with this person, and that's really hard to do, you know? He wants to
Yeah.
be a part of his son's life, but he doesn't want to, have to trade his life in for the process. And that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's true to life, you know?
Well, I agree with that because you know what? People being a person is hard, man. People life is not easy. Like, there's no guide on how to be a person, right? Being a person is very difficult for a lot of us, for different people. And like you said, Pam is constantly presented with a dilemma, with a choice. And Pam is saying to themselves, like, what the fuck? Like why is this my dilemma? Why is this my choice? However, again, there's also instances where Pam does lead a very self-destructive lifestyle that does affect other areas of their life, right? Like addiction, like isolation, like loneliness, like hanging out with the wrong crowd. So yeah, being a person is complicated, and all of these characters, all of them that we see in the film, are all complicated in their own ways.
And I think you did such a good job of making each character complicated because I never felt like I was really rooting for one character in particular because
Yeah.
all of them had like realistic flaws in their, who they are to where I could just like to watch it unfold, because one thing that took me back about Pam, and I think this is good because, sometimes they want to make the protagonist this perfect character that you want to root for,
Sure.
but he has HIV and he's out sleeping with multiple different men, and spreading that disease.
Yeah.
So he has such little regard for other people in that regard. So I thought that was pretty cool because when I'm watching, I'm like, when something bad would happen to him, I was like, well, he did do that. So it's almost like I'm just observing it instead of like being super invested in just the one character, because I'm just invested in the story.
Yeah, and again, the fact that you're able to pull different aspects of different characters and feel one way or another, right? I mean, life isn't a one-way street, right? When we look at someone that we know or that we love or that we hate, more often than not, we have conflicting feelings about different people, right? We don't feel one way or another about people, and that's what we wanted to convey with this film. And these characters, they do make mistakes, and sometimes they're unlucky, right? Pam, they're just unlucky sometimes, and Pam also makes mistakes. Pam also does things that are not good. Um, and when we look at a character like Beetle, right? When we mentioned this earlier, how Beetle actually turns out to be the antagonist of the movie. Beetle turns out to be this really awful person. Um, that has a lot to do with what Peter was able to bring to the role. Peter played this incredibly charismatic, had this incredibly charismatic persona as this character, and it almost makes you forget, like, holy shit, Beetle's a really, really bad guy. Like, uh, but we almost forget about that when we watch the film because Beetle's so damn charismatic and he's funny and he's weird and he kind of says really weird things and does really weird things. And then, I've seen this movie a million times, obviously. Now, every time I watch it, I start to see the cracks. I start to see, like, holy shit, like I think the more someone watches this film, they will start to see on the surface that, yeah, Beetle is not a good guy. And I think we learn that a lot sooner than the final scene. So yeah, like you said, as far as taking empathy and also taking ownership of their mistakes, that really has a lot to do with this amazing cast.
Yeah, and
I
I
feel like
think
I'd have to agree with Jake just because like
Yeah.
I was kind of debating about whether or not to root for Pam the whole time. I feel like the only reason why I was because like he gets most of the screen time, so I'm like, let's go along the ride with him.
hmm Well, I think they're again. I don't think there's anything to not root for Pam as far as what they want, right? Their goal in the film, I think that is something that is easy to root for, should be easy to root for. However, again, Pam does make mistakes, and I could totally understand why that would feel almost conflicting in certain areas of the film because Pam does make mistakes. But yeah, for me, Pam's ultimate goal, I think, is something to root for. You know, Pam just wants to be understood.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The ultimate goal is definitely something that should be rooted for. It's just, the little bits of it shows that he's not this perfect character, so it's
Yeah,
not like it's not
that's what
if
it's
something
about.
bad happens to him, it's not, oh, it's just an innocent bystander, And I like that as a film where I'm like kind of watching it, I'm not feeling, oh, here's this perfect character. And I just find the character of Beetle so fascinating because I think he comes across at first, and I've watched it a few times now, and I want to keep
Oh,
watching
thank
it because
you.
also, big props to you. I like that the film is an hour and 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I really think that's like the future of filmmaking, making things around that time frame.
Thank
I
you.
feel like that's super digestible. It really packs a punch. I see a lot of films and I'm like, I really like it, but I feel like they might have added 10 minutes they didn't need. They added maybe 20
Yeah.
minutes. This film, I felt like every minute of that hour and 3 minutes was used to its maximum. And I think that well done on that. We
Thank you
need to
so
see
much.
more hour and 3 minute films.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I mean, I would like to make more films that are, I made a first feature. This was my second feature. I made my first feature and that was over 2 hours. That was insane. That was 2 hours and 8 minutes, my first feature. And I said to myself, I don't want to do that again because, like you said, people don't have the fucking time or the attention span for that. I certainly probably don't either at this point. So I think, yeah, like you said, the future of films is sort of going back to those 90-minute movies, those 85-minute indie films. And, I would like to shoot for maybe around 75 to 80 minutes for my next film. But yeah, man, it's all about pacing, really, like you said, definitely.
Yeah, the pacing is the most important thing, and I think that when you have that less time, it makes you pace better because it's like you have to fill it in that certain time. Because we're filmmakers too, and our first feature film, we made it our senior year of college. It was about an
Okay.
hour 30, about hour 30, hour like roughly hour 40, and we
Mhm.
got killed in the reviews because like it was good, but I felt like there was some lull, And looking back, I'm like, I wish
Yeah,
I would have condensed it to maybe like an hour 10. So I like that you're going
totally.
out there and making it shorter like that because it's fun to watch.
Thank you.
I
I
didn't realize it was
appreciate
that long though. I thought it was shorter than that.
No, we're right at like an hour 40. They let us know in the reviews.
Yeah, I trust me. Been there, done that, man.
Yeah.
I thought you brought up an interesting point a couple minutes ago. You said that you found Beetle to be a really fascinating character, and I also agree with that too. Because Beetle, again, like I was saying before, Beetle, when you watch the film at first, he's funny and he's very loud and he rants and he rambles and he says really odd things, and then by the end, it's like, whoa, this is not a good guy.
And what's cool about that too,
Yeah.
I feel like Beetle really makes this film all together because Beetle, in a weird way, is almost the antithesis of Pam's problems. Like every
Yes.
bad decision Pam's made,
Yeah.
not saying Beetle had to forcibly made him to do, but Beetle's the one validating those decisions, in a weird way.
I would completely agree with that
And
120%.
And Beetle kind of starts off as this is what I thought him as kind of like the lovable loser. He's going to be the comedic relief,
Yeah.
lovable loser. And to see that kind of, that trope of character, the lovable loser, this stoner dude, but him turn into literally the villain of it was crazy. And it was so subtle, but the way you did it, where it was subtle, but also all the signs are right there. So you have it in your head. Yeah, he maybe he's not the best person, but he's so, like you said, charismatic that he draws you in and you're overlooking all this stuff. And then you find out that he was like harassing the kid, his own kid,
Yeah,
It's
he
like,
he was a pedophile.
yeah,
Pam said,
he's
try to
vile.
fuck my kid. Like it's disgusting. It's vile, like you said. And that's
Yeah.
all wrapped within these layers of charisma and humor and this lovable loser sort of thing that Beetle has going. And Peter did such a tremendous job. Peter was so dedicated to this character, to this role. And like you said, Beetle is sort of this person that reinforces all these bad behaviors that Pam does and that Pam goes through. And I thought that was another interesting point too that I certainly agree with.
Yeah,
So I
he's
have to ask you.
yeah, you go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, I was just gonna jump to a couple more questions that I had. I just had to ask you first. Did you how were you able to create such a realistic depiction of like prostitution life? Was it just like reading the articles about like what was going on in New York at the time, like you were talking about earlier, or did you actually like go and do some field research? What went into that?
Well, I think, we're making a movie about some very sensitive topics and some very sensitive lifestyles. And it was important to each of us, especially Tom and I, to reach out and to speak to certain people from these communities, right? And to observe and to study and to do our research. So it was a mixture of multiple different things as far as research, talking, back and forth, me and Tom every single day, talking to people from these respective communities, and also, when you make a movie. You're making a movie and you want it to feel natural, right? That's all I keep saying is natural, natural, natural. It's important to try and get these things right. It's important to depict these lifestyles in a way that is not harmful, that is not cruel, however, in a way that also showcases the best and worst of what it means to be a person, right? And I don't think the movie's ever one way or another about what the movie's about, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think the movie's just about this or just about that. I think the movie is layered in that regard. So we don't get to spend too much time focused on one little thing. And I think that also helps. The viewer appreciate it. And like you said, making something like prostitution feel natural. There's nothing inherently wrong about someone who is responsible and wants to do their thing and wants to be a sex worker. That's great. In Pam's case, Pam states multiple times throughout the film they're addicted to sex. They use sex as a means for monetary and pleasure, pleasurable gain. And that's just what it is. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I think that it handles a very, sensitive subject very well. And I like that it doesn't downplay it and it also doesn't glamorize it. It just kind of shows it like this is how it is for these people that are living this lifestyle,
Yeah,
from a little glimpse. I think that does a very good job.
thank
and my
you.
final question to you, I just have to ask, towards the end of the film, when Pam is eating the bag of Taco Bell, where did the inspiration for that come from?
Well, first off, that Taco Bell it got like bulldozed a couple months ago. That's like right down the block from my house, and they're building a new Taco Bell. That was like the old like 2010s Taco Bell, but now they're building like this new modern Taco Bell. So that place doesn't even exist anymore. Um, Number two, inspiration behind it. Listen, let me say this. Is there anything more depressing than eating Taco Bell alone at 11 p.m. at night inside a Taco Bell? Like that is, I'm sorry, but I think that's a depressing lifestyle. And I think, we're throughout the second half of the film, right? And talking about that specific scene, we're trying to show this sense of isolation and loneliness that Pam talks about a lot during the first half of the movie. Because during the first half of the movie, we see Pam constantly in a scene with someone else, but all they keep saying is, well, I'm alone. No one understands me. I'm alone. And then we segue into the second half, and we do start to see the moments where Pam is alone. And we're starting to, I wanted to show people like, hey, Pam's not bullshitting here. This is a complicated life. And Pam spends a lot of time alone doing things like this, smoking crack in their motel room or hanging out in laundromats all hours of the night, hanging out in Taco Bell, hanging out in their car, listening to old voicemails. That was the biggest
On
reason why I wanted to do that scene.
Honestly, when I was watching that, because the reason why I asked is my first thought was not like the actual movie storyline. My first thought was, did he get paid for his product placement?
No, oh, I wish. I wish. I love Taco Bell. Definitely not, though. But I will give you Pam's order. I believe in the film, Pam eats a hard taco, a potato soft griller, and a little bag of chips as well.
So
So,
I'm gonna go to my local Taco Bell site. Can I have the Pam special, please?
yeah.
But I like what you said about it kind of shows that loneliness because I feel like you're right. At the start, you're kind of like you just hear him complain about his loneliness, but that loneliness kind of creeps up on you in the film, and you start seeing, oh wow, he really is like this. And that's around the time he's desperately trying to get back in contact with his son Peter. So I thought that was pretty well done.
Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh yeah, Paul.
certainly agree. That's okay. Peter's Beetle. Peter plays
Yeah.
Beetle.
Oh, that's right. I
Um,
keep getting.
that's okay. That's okay. Like you said, it's around the same time that Pam really tries to reach out to Paul and really tries to make that effort. And I don't think Pam ever like wanted to neglect their relationship with Paul. I think it was always a matter of Pam is at a completely different place in life where they can't take on the responsibility of being a father to Paul, right? And I think that has more so again to do with someone like Beetle being around, this sort of self-destructive, drug-fueled lifestyle that Beetle has dare we say influenced over Pam. So yeah.
Well, I have a couple last wrapping up questions for you.
Sure.
Is there any fun, interesting days on set? Any like hard filming days? Any interesting behind the scenes stories you want to share? Because those are always interesting. I love asking our filmmakers that come on the show.
Well, so the second to last scene, right, when Pam goes to confront Beetle in the bedroom, at Beetle's mom's house. Um, when we were trying to film that scene, it was early in the morning, and it just so happens that we filmed that scene at the actor Peter's house, the actor who plays Beetle. We filmed it at his house in his room. However, in the film, it's Beetle's mom's house. That's why it's so nice. Um, but we do that, and when we're filming, right in the middle of filming, there is like some sort of like a leaf blower going off, and you could hear it throughout the whole neighborhood. Is this loud, very, very loud leaf blower. We shot this in the fall of 2024. And it was just like, yo, we can't film right now. Like we have to like take a fucking pause. So we sent Peter out there to talk to the leaf blower. And he was just like, hey man, we're trying to make a movie right now. Can you like come back in a couple hours? Is that cool? And he was like, yeah, yeah, no problem. And that was like that was a really funny moment because, right in the middle of this fucking super dramatic, dark scene, uncomfortable scene, there's just this it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's filmmaking for you when you're out just like at whatever location you can get and you can't control what's behind you. There
Oh
could
my
be a kid.
God.
Sometimes when we were making ours, we had to shoot at this one spot that
Yeah.
was like right by a gun range. So we would get
Wow.
there and like we couldn't even
The
shoot. We
famous
couldn't.
guns.
Yeah, we couldn't
Wow.
even. It was we. I feel your pain
I
on
can
that.
imagine. Yeah, the noise must be crazy. I mean, a lot, throughout the film, we're shooting in public a lot, right? You see the different locations. Like we didn't, a lot of that was running and gunning. Like we're not asking for permission. We're just gonna shoot here.
Right.
So or even then, even if we have permission, like people are, we can't control the environment even with permission. And so we had people like in the thrift store scene between Pam and Rose, right? When Pam is picking out the gift. Uh, that scene, not only was it really, really hot that day, we were all sweating very badly in the store. The store had like no air conditioning whatsoever. It was horrible. Um, but the people that were, shopping around us, like there was this one lady and she was like, "Oh, I think they're making a movie. I'm gonna try and get in the movie." And she was like coming around my shoulder trying to get in frame. And like we had someone on set that was like, "Hey, lady, you gotta back up," so when you're making a film that you want to feel like a documentary, you're gonna go and be in places that, or not even just that type of film. If you're making a movie and you have no money, you're gonna be in places where you can't control your environment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you so much on that as a filmmaker
Yeah,
myself. I know when you're out there just guerrilla filmmaking, working with whatever location you can, you
yeah,
can't
exactly,
control who's there. You can't control any of those sounds. So I just think that's
exactly.
funny how that's just a universal. You hope we make enough of these films, we make enough sacrifices that one day we could be the people that shut down a whole town to make
Yeah,
the.
that would certainly be cool, man. Definitely.
But the last question I got for you is I think you got your amazing film right now. I think you're
Thank you.
marketing it well. I think you're really hitting it hard. I
Thank
want to
you so
thank
much.
you for being the first filmmaker we have ever had on the show that actually sent me an EPK. I always ask for them, and all they do, they just slap a link on my DM, and I'm like, watch my
Really?
film. So I appreciate. I try to preach to everyone that you got to be good at marketing your film as well and having EPKs and sending that on out emails and stuff. And
Yeah,
you're a good example of that. So I want them to
so much.
learn from your success.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been a really extraordinary conversation. And, I love this show and this has been a really great time. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Stay at Home Son podcast. Make sure to check off Jr Stokes in the caption below. I will link all his socials and handles all down there and
Thank you.
below. And also check out the Beautiful Pam film.
Yep, it'll be free on YouTube by the time this comes out.
Awesome. I'll definitely be watching it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, y'all have a great day.
Okay.